So hello, today I'm at All Saints Church in Stock in Essex, and I'm going to talk about the history of the church and the village itself. So Stock is a village in Essex. It's 6 miles from Chelmsford City and it's 3 miles from Billericay. Stock itself is surrounded by some of the finest Essex farmland around, with a myriad of twisty country lanes connecting nearby villages. The elevation here is 318 feet, where we stand, which is All Saints Church behind me. The population is around 1,590. It's a bit of a sad day today. Queen Elizabeth II passed yesterday at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She was 96. So today I believe churches are allowed to ring their bells for 1 hour from noon. Now where we stand today is an old part of Essex, just south of Stock, on the main road, the B1007, which is running to our side. A Bronze Age mound was discovered. It was some 55 feet in diameter. We know that the Trinovanti Celtic tribes were here. Axe heads, tools and pottery were discovered. Now in 1979 a Neolithic axe head was discovered here also. Now when Emperor Claudius marched on Colchester in AD 43, 20,000 legionnaires and war elephants were by his side. He set up forts, one being in nearby Bluntswell, Billericay, and if you follow that road about 3 miles you've got Billericay. If you're interested in going to Bluntswell, it's near the cricket club. Now a further outpost was set up in Norsey Woods, and the next highest point would actually be where we stand now, on Stock Hill. Now if you can imagine that Stock, or Roman Stock, was covered in the great Essex forests where we would be standing now, and a small track most likely following this very road we're looking at now, there would be a marching route used by the 11th Legion, and it would have cut straight through here. So we've now left where the church is, and now we're going into Stock itself. If we follow this road it will take you to Chelmsford. So this would be the old marching route of the Romans. So in 1885 workmen unearthed Roman urns and vases in the old Roman Catholic cemetery. And if you look here you can see headstones built into this old wall of this church. Now the Celtic Queen Boudicca marched on to Colchester and London in 61 AD, sacking Chelmsford, only 6 miles away. It's possible Boudicca's army marched through Stock en route to Billericay, which was another Roman settlement of that time. Very little is known of Stock's history during the Saxon period, during those dark ages. We know that Guthrum, the Viking sea lord of 878, conquered all of Essex and London. Stock would be under Danish rule for 7 long years. Then once more Saxon rule and peace would return right here. In nearby Butsbury village, where I stand right now, there would have been 7 Saxon manors. Only 3 wrapped themselves around Stock. Stock was known as Stockair, meaning the hut, later to become Harewood Stock, and Harewood may have been the man in charge of this great forest with its wooden hut. Now in 1017, Canute the Great, the Danish Viking, would conquer all of England for the next 25 years. In this time, many a Dane and Saxon would intermarry, and Essex had become a patchwork of manors. Many a Norse or Saxon thane would own lands here. It looks like Butsbury and Stock were joined as one, known as Genghis Joybert. We know that in 1066, Bondi the Constable was the overlord of Butsbury. 4 villagers, 2 smallholders, 3 slaves looked after the tames, 500 pigs and 160 sheep. Bondi also owned 2 plough teams here. Bondi was in fact a wealthy Danish Viking and landowner. A member of Edward the Confessor's inner circle, Bondi would serve King Harold and William the Conqueror. He must have been highly respected. The ancient Tyrell family of Butsbury, where I stand now, also had a stake in Stock's church. The lords would take turns in presenting a new rector to the living. In front of us is one of the Tyrells from that period. Now by 1086, Stock and Butsbury were ruled by the Normans and Henry de Ferrers. Now Henry owned no land in England before the conquest. He would be lord of 216 manors by 1086. All Saints Church was most likely built during the life of Henry de Ferrers. Today's Crondon Park was the border of Old Stock. Crondon's Saxon Manor was owned by the Bishop of London. Now in 1140, Stock is mentioned by a small Benedictine nunnery in Cambridgeshire as Harwood Stock. The king had granted a market to take place here every Thursday. And for this, the king would take 6 oak trees from its ancient forest here. Now during the 14th century, Stock is mentioned on numerous occasions. In the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, John Jeffrey, bailiff of East Hanningfield, had briefed his men of surrounding villages to meet right here at Crondon Park. They would rise up against King Richard II and sack London. Much rioting would go on. The ancient Norsey Woods, which is about 3 miles from here, would be their end. 500 Essex men were slain by King Richard's soldiers and cavalry, and they would be buried in Great Burstey's Church. Now during this period, All Saints Church sustained a fair amount of damage and vandalism. The rood loft and the stone proscenium were smashed. Some years later, when prosperity and peace returned, All Saints would receive a mighty wooden belfry and a new oak roof, we shall see later. Stock itself has claim to its very own hermit from the medieval period. A hermit existed somewhere between Stock and Butsbury. We know not where, but often sighted at bridges and fords. Stock's hermit would have been a member of a religious order with the authority from the bishop. Now, when Elizabeth I made it compulsory to use the new Common Prayer Book of 1559, Bishop Bonar of London would refuse the oath of supremacy of Elizabeth. Ending his days in prison, Bishop Bonar owned Crondon Park, and so Crondon Park would pass on to Sir William Petre. Now, Queen Elizabeth I herself would stay at nearby Ingatestone Hall, Sir William's residence, in 1561. Only 3 miles from here. Now, in these years, witchcraft accusations were thrown around. Staying in Crondon's Park in neighbouring cottages, Agnes Sawen was alleged to have bewitched Christopher Veal's feet. Agnes would become a prisoner at Colchester's castle. It turns out that Christopher's father was the churchwarden in Stock in 1586. Now, of Essex's 420 villages, half had such cases of witchcraft. You can see where the term witchcraft originates from. Now, records show that the land of Crondon would end opposite the Ship Pub where I'm standing now. The park was an easy target for poachers. James Hatchett and Anthony Errington of Stock were caught in 1578 carrying 2 stags. Now, Stock has some excellent and fascinating pubs. The Cock Inn, which we look at now been called the Harvard Inn. This used to stand on the old boundary of Butsbury and Stock. First recorded in 1527, landlord John Ponder, and his words were left to his daughter his feather bed when he passed. The next landlord was warned he faced 6 hours in the public stocks for allowing customers to play cards on feast day. We have landlord Robert Newman of 1581. He was involved in the court case against the alleged witch Agnes Sawen. Now, next to the Cock Inn once stood the village square, where the car park stands today. A pond would require a Robert Newman to dig a deep ditch for a cucking stall, which was the village ducking stall. The village cuckolds were the unfaithful wives, and John James's wife was dipped in the pond. Her crime, she was arguing with the bailiff of Sir John Peter. And if you look, that's where the car park is today. Now we're going to look at Stock's next ancient pub. This is the Bear Inn. So directly opposite sits the Bear Inn, another of the old pubs. 1557, it was known simply as Le Bear. Now, like its cock-inn cousin across the road, it was known for cockfighting and bear baiting. But remember, this was nearly 500 years ago. Now, Charlie Marshall worked here as a potman, collecting glasses. He slept in the stables to the rear. Charlie would amuse the guests by climbing up the chimney from the tap room bar and come down in the parlour bar sometime later. And this gave him the nickname Spider. He would earn himself a free pint or some food. But on this occasion he never came down. Now, between the two chimneys sat a bacon loft to smoke the meat. Spider, never been found. Charlie's become a folk hero. If we look, it's probably the two main chimneys to the front. Now we're heading towards the Hoop Inn, away from the centre of Stock. The popular Hoop Inn, 1733. It's said that ship's timbers made up its old frame. This weatherboarded pub is typical of Essex. Now, I discovered just before World War I the Bacon family lived here, and William was the landlord. His three sons, Stanley, Harry and Frederick, would all serve in the war. Stanley was a gamekeeper. His brother Frederick, a stagecoach painter, and Stanley would end his days in the Battle of the Somme, 1916. I saw them in the memorial at Butsbury Church. To the rear of Stock's High Street we find another pub, the Baker's Arms. Before it was the Jolly Miller. Back in the 1830s it was a beer shop. In its garden stood one of Stock's windmills, and in 1835 the landlord, Bernard Flack, was given its licence to serve. In 1845 a new windmill was built in Stock as we see today. William Moss would relocate a third windmill, and all three would stand in a line. But by 1890 two of the mills would fall into disrepair. It must have made quite an impressive sight. And this mill is still open to the public on certain days, owned by Essex County Council. Right, now we're heading off to Stock's cricket pitch. World War I saw troops arrive here from the infantry and Royal Horse Artillery, galloping across this very pitch. The troops built trenches on the nearby farm, and it must have been quite a sight. Now, in 1916, L-32, the Super Zeppelin, crashed in Great Bursted. The burning Zeppelin lit up the sky here, and many would walk to the site. And if we pan around those grey skies, if we go right into the corner, probably where that giant oak tree is, you would have seen it. And here in front of us on the cricket pitch we have one of the beacons, which in old times were used for warning. Now they are used for celebrations. They may well be used soon to remember the Queen. The War Memorial of Stock and Butsbury lists 41 men who never returned. In 1940 yet another war would descend. Stock set up its own home guard, led by a Dutchman called Mr. Peterson. The plan was to pour barrels of tar over the road to stop the German advance if it ever came. So Stock at the turn of the century was a very busy place, just as it is now. There are 2 bakers, 2 butchers, 2 grocers, a bricklayer, a carpenter, a saddler, a smith, a farrier for the horses, 2 shoemakers, even a glazier, and most importantly a maltster to serve ale, because this had a lot of stagecoaches coming through here. In 1889 the village got its very own policeman, William George Arnold. Remember, this was in the Edwardian period. No electricity, no gas, no running water. The whole village was served water from the village pump, and it still survives today. And in the background you just might be able to hear the church bells being rang to remember the Queen. So the good folk of Stock are ringing the bells now, or the bell, and it will go on for to the end of 1 o'clock, I guess. It'll be 1 hour. They've told me that they ring it, take it in turns for about 2.5 minutes per person, because it's quite a hard bell to swing. The reason is because during the war this church was damaged badly. The bell cannot actually swing all the way over. So we'll have a look inside.
it. You've got to let it go up. Ooh, no, I better let someone get it going again.
Let me get it going.
So on a beautiful summer's afternoon on the 7th of September 1940, Flight Lieutenant Reginald Lovett skimmed the treetops here in his damaged Hurricane. Reginald sadly died, but he saved many villagers of stock. Now All Saints Church itself would not escape. A high explosive parachute mine would detonate, blowing off its roof and the windows. And incredibly, a year later, the church had been patched up. And a very special visitor would pop in, Winston Spencer Churchill himself. Quite incredible. Now in 1945, the parish Reverend Austin would retire, and 39 priests would come for the job, but all would reject it when they saw All Saints and all its battle scars. Now it would be 20 more years before Stock got a parish priest, an American called Father Paul Plouffe. The prayer books used have been issued by the American United States Air Force. Now I'm not sure if he was connected to this church or the Catholic Church, so I'll point that out. Now in 1978 the boundary changes took place between Butsbury and Stock, and so ending the line which ran through the centre of the Cock Inn Bar. Crondon Hall itself would become part of Stock. Now today's Butsbury, if you go there you will find only the ancient church, St Mary's, survives, and a scattering of houses and farms. So it would be Stock, its little brother, that would prosper and flourish. So now we shall concentrate on this lovely church itself. Now All Saints Church itself, the walls are of rubble and brick with limestone dressings. The earliest part of All Saints dates to around 1150. Now excavation work in 1948 discovered foundations from an earlier Saxon building. It's most intriguing. So now we're standing inside the belfry itself. It's 15th century. Now the church has no tower as such, but a magnificent and rare oak structure supporting its shingled spire. Now the word belfry comes from the old northern French word belfry, meaning siege tower. And this in turn comes from the Germanic bergfricht, meaning high place to protect. The estimated construction date is around 1450. If you look in the centre, you can just make out the green man. Amazing construction. Look into the centre, we have the green man carving there. It's most unusual. So we're back on the outside. So it's built in 2 stages with weatherboarded top, and the lower has a surrounding aisle. The upper stage has a short octagonal spire. And if you look, that odd shape, that's because it was extended, and I can give you the date a little bit later. Now we're on the west doorway. It's got oak moulded door jambs and 2 centred oak arch and trunk-seared squandrels. And above there's 3 hand carved lights with cuspbell tracery. It's very special indeed. What do we say? It's about 1450s. Most impressive. The belfry is very similar to that of St Margaret's and Margaretting. I'm wondering if the same builders were involved, and we can actually see a date carving up there, which is, considering its age, has weathered really well. So here we have the south porch. This is built in 1450. It's a magnificent outer oak archway and moulded crossbeam. You can see the barge boards there. So have a closer look. You can see the 5 panels there. Look at the coloration of that. You can see the dowel pegs and the ornate traceries. It's magnificent. You can actually see where they've cut a piece in there. If we go inside, we can see the side walls are fitted with 18th century balusters. And you can see this magnificent roof. Rests on these very ornate carved wall plates. You can see the pegs there. It's a very light colour as well. I'm just wondering if at one period it was actually painted white. Now just by the door jamb itself, we've got a piscina here dated from about 1390. Originated from inside All Saints Church, next to the rood screen. It's been much damaged during the 14th century. And what we have here is a sort of bird screen, which is a really good idea. So we have a look inside. Now this is one of these lovely old churches that are kept open, so please visit. Now, I don't have any information on the door. I guess this is a Victorian one, and it's got a very unusual handle there. And these markings, which you'll see quite common on door straps, are to ward away evil spirits, I guess. You'll find them on most churches. Now we've entered the nave, and it measures 44 feet by 22 feet. It's most likely it dates to about 1150, but it has a 14th and 15th century alterations. Now the roof was renewed and restored along with the benches which were here before, so obviously not here, and that was done in 1848. Now the roof, what we see today, has been renewed from the World War II damage. I did ask what the flowers represent, if it's an English rose, and I was told it's the Virgin Mary, I believe. Now what you'll see today is a condolences book for Majesty the Queen. And there's a candle lit as well. Now just to the south door itself, we've got a lovely font. Now this is early 15th century. It's an octagonal bowl. I believe this cover is by Francis Stevens, and which replaced a cover from the 17th century. On the south wall we've got a window that was donated by the Mothers Union of 1950. Now also on the south wall we've got a memorial to, let me have a look, it's Admiral Sir Vernon Haggard, the Royal Navy officer who became, let me zoom back a bit, Commander-in-Chief in America and the West Indies. Admiral Haggard served 40 years. And we'll have a look outside at the actual grave. So if we look at this window on the south wall, this was a family memorial from 1957, again from the bomb damage. We zoom up, we can see a most beautiful, vibrant colours. If we go up a bit, there's another further window on the south wall. I guess this is from the same family. You can actually see the clothing from, say, 57. If we pan around, we've got a very old memorial. Which we'll have a closer look at. Now this is a memorial to Richard Twedgie, who served at court and was a justice of the peace, and in his last will and testament he left land opposite All Saints. Almshouses were built for 2 poor men from Stock and 2 from Boreham. They would receive 12 pence per person per week. Sounds like a decent man. Now his great-grandfather, George Tweedy, came from Scotland. If we look, we can see a date. Now if you look in the corner there, you can see a cross. Now it says here, this was one of 5 crosses marking its consecration as an altar stone. And if you look there, you can just make out another cross. 1574. Now we've moved over to the north aisle. It's 13 feet wide and it's 15th century. If you look at the north doorway, it's modern, but it's using the original strap hinges. The roof is a single framed rafters and king post from around 1430. Now if we pan around, we've got a most unusual limewood rood figures by Gwyneth Holt, 1955. I'm lost for words what it's actually called. I think it's a Langton or something. Memory slipped me there. As you walk through, you can see these amazing columns. Now we're looking at the North Chapel, and it says that it was built around 1904, so I'm not sure if it's replacing an earlier one. The original doorway to the rood loft from 1380, which you can see there. Now in 1903, a wall here was demolished, exposing the hidden rood doorway. This loft would have been important for ceremonies. Once the crucifix of Jesus Christ and the figures of Mother Mary and John the Baptist would have been located, looking down upon the medieval worshippers. We should go through this old doorway. I have a smaller altar here for smaller services. So that's Mother Mary. We've got another nice fine window here. This is a family memorial, 1951. Vibrant colours. I'm not sure if this is called an Albury, where they keep the holy bread and wine. Now, if you look closely on this jamb for the rood, you can just about see some of the original colour coming through. And on the north wall of the aisle, we've got a picture of Jesus and we've got some memorials. And as the sun comes through the window, we've got some lovely light dispersing on the floor tiles. Now we're facing the chancel. Now the chancel was completely rebuilt in 1848 and it was paid for by Reverend Edward Edison. Now exactly 100 years later in 1848, workmen found a bricked up tomb under the chancel step. It's most likely that it was from that of Richard Tweedy, who built the almshouses. The date of the original chancel is unknown. Now, in 1981, All Saints was refurbished to designs of Lawrence King, including chairs and choir stalls. The north vestry was added in 1989. Now, if we look at the ceiling or the roof of the chancel, it's most unusual design. Now, as I understand it, the roof is actually leaking and is causing damp into the walls. So the church is currently raising funds for a new roof. And this sedalia in the corner is quite unusual, the design of it. Now there's a window on the south side of the chancel, and this is to the glory of God and the commemoration of the Guild of St Lucian, 1935-1950. Now if we look at this board, it's got the rectors of Stock Harvard, and what interests me is the patrons here. There's some really old names. This Blunt, H.U. Blunt, the Blunt family owned two manors or areas, or farms around Billericay and this area. We've got the Tyrrell family, and we've got the Ferrers, another Tyrrell, Ferrers, Tyrrell, and so on. You can see the connection between the lords of the manor and the church itself. Okay, we're going to finish up now by looking at this old magnificent organ, which I've got no information on. And you can see the stairs that go up to the organ itself. Just like to mention that Stock Church are holding a few events here, which you may be interested in. So they've got a flower festival and a harvest feast and dance. Now you heard the lovely bells before. I can tell you about them. The oldest is by John Deere and John Wicks of 1577, who cast the inscription. And in 1577, Francis Drake, aboard the Pelican ship, he goes for an expedition to the Americas. Drake would circumnavigate the world soon after. So let us finish now by having a look around the grounds and the outside of the building. It's quite unusual, they've got a rose growing up the side of the wall, south wall. I've not seen that before. And you can clearly see how the Victorians put their stamp on things. I think from memory this is a fairly recent rebuild, but you can see they've kept it traditional. And if you look here, you've got the markings again there. If you look there, you've got representation of the Green Man. And we walk into the lower cemetery, and this is the memorial, I guess grave as well, for the Admiral. I think this would make a nice painting from here. You can see the grounds are quite big. So this must be guess in the vestry. Or is that the vestry? No, this is the chancel. Got it wrong. Yeah, this must be the vestry. This must be the recent addition. If you look here, you can see pudding stone from the last great ice age. Actually, you can see it's all fused together. So from memory, that's about 11,700 years BC. And it actually went through Ingate stone, so not far from here at all. So this would have all been under, I think it's 3 kilometres of ice. Yeah, you can see the new addition to the vestry there. And this is the north aisle. This, I believe, is some of the oldest stonework. And if you look at the top, got a most unusual gargoyle. So it looks like finally beaten by the weather. So All Saints Church is a very active church within the community, and they carry out baptisms, weddings and funerals. And it's open every day. Thank you very much.